everybody, and welcome back to the Room to Breathe podcast. And you are joining me here for the first official episode where I'm actually going to be getting into a bunch of interesting topics and setting up an actual structure. It means a lot to me that you're listening, so thank you so much. Please consider subscribing and following. If you subscribe, you can know when I release a new episode, so that could be really fun. So, today we're going to be talking about something that is very dear to my heart. We're going to be delving into the topic of restorative nostalgia, the romanticization of pain, and how we can learn to enjoy the present. I'm so excited to get into today's topic. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just get into it. So as I said before, I think I've always been just a very nostalgic person. When I'm with my friends, I love just having those conversations that are like, remember when, or just reading my old diary entries and just seeing like what I thought like back then and listening to my old music, stuff like that. Anything that just kind of invokes that bittersweet feeling, I love that. But the reason that I actually came up with this video topic is not because of that. It was because of something that came up on my TikTok For You page, which is actually kind of surprising, I guess. So it was not just any video, it was a video of Flamingo. And if you don't know who that is, he was a very popular Roblox YouTuber. And I'm sure most of you guys who are listening to this know who he is because he was super popular during quarantine with kids and stuff. I was a gigantic fan of this guy. I was his fan from like, I don't know, 2018 to 2021. He still makes a bunch of videos and Roblox content to this day, I'm pretty sure. And it's really crazy because I think he started like way back in like 2013 or just like super long ago, just making Roblox content. Anyways, I think his channel was just such a big part of my childhood. I remember at one point in my life in like fourth grade, like my entire class hated me and I had no friends and I would just come home really sad. But I remember I would just log on to this guy's YouTube videos and I would click on one of them and I just laugh at how absurd he was and it would just make me feel better instantly. So the clip that I saw actually was pretty recent, probably like a year ago or something. But basically, what it was just him saying, I quote, you don't miss the old Roblox, you miss being happy. And that just made me think because what he was referring to is just like people feeling nostalgic and reminiscing back on the time where I guess Roblox used to be like less developed, a bit like happier, more genuine, like less drama, less stuff going on. I don't know, just like back when things were simpler. So I guess it just made me think because I think this game is rooted so deeply in my childhood. And we do, as just humans, we have this tendency of yearning for the past because we feel like we have this version of ourselves back there that we've lost. I think we feel like the versions of ourselves in the past are so much more fulfilled and happy than the versions of ourselves that we have now. And I think that this quote is like, it's silly, but it just applies to like life too. What we miss when we look back on things and we have regret, it's more of, I guess, the feelings that we had. It just feels like we've lost something that we can't get back. So this quite ironically hit me like a load of bricks because as someone who reminisces a lot, I do think that there is a point where nostalgia can just get super unhealthy and when our brains start exaggerating the good and start kind of lying to us actually. At one point, lingering on the past too much turns unhealthy and it turns into romanticizing the times that we cannot get back, things that have already gone away, and times that even could have been very painful. We just kind of look back on them and only see the good parts of them. So, memories are just a gigantic part of our self identity. They're lessons, connections back to comfort and to our childhood, obviously. I think memories are just experiences that nobody else will really understand. They're super personal, like a connection that you had maybe with a video game, a particular song, a TV show, or something that you used to do when you were little. These are all experiences in our lives that we keep in our heads and that not everybody else will really know. We are the only people who truly will experience all of them. Obviously, I just think that's why we have such an emotional hold to them and why they just kind of build up who we are as people. So, looking at the textbook definition, nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. So, I've done a lot of research on this topic, and I'm just going to be breaking down nostalgia into two different forms just to make it easier to refer back to what I'm talking about. So, the two different types of forms of nostalgia that I'm going to be talking about are reflective nostalgia and restorative nostalgia. So, reflective nostalgia is kind of what we feel when we hear a certain sound, smell a certain smell, or see something that invokes a positive reaction in our brain, like a memory that has passed us. It's usually a positive feeling, maybe sometimes bittersweet. When we get to low points, this reflective form of nostalgia can honestly just be very empowering and motivating for us. It's a source of inspiration and motivation to move through hardship sometimes. So, reminiscing on the past can sometimes help us remember how we do have the capability to be happy and to make strong connections with other people. So, for instance, during AP week, it's obviously super stressful for everyone. Whenever I'm studying for these, I have this really old 8 hour long playlist of just super cringy childhood, like old songs that I have, like back from quarantine, back from like just when I was a little kid. And strangely enough, it's like obviously funny, but like strangely enough, it's very motivating too. I think just remembering these things from my childhood that I probably have forgotten about through these songs just gives me a little bit of a dopamine boost. It kind of helps me when I'm studying for finals, which is a little weird, but yeah. And I also do feel the same about a lot of like childhood shows that I used to watch. When I look back on those, I just feel like the sense of comfort and like just all the memories and I guess it's just something that's very like positive and happy to look back on, something that's really motivating instead of otherwise. So now about the other form, which is restorative nostalgia. It's kind of centers around idealizing the past and romanticizing things and only focusing on the silver linings of what happened before. This form of nostalgia invokes a sense of deep pain and regret instead of a smiley, comforting feeling. So it's more about fixating on the times that have passed and wishing to recreate them or go back to how they were instead of just thinking like, "Oh, that was nice. Let me move on." I think in the past, especially like mainly through middle school, I used to do this so much. And I used to feel just really weird for feeling the way that I did when I guess I looked back on a certain memory. I thought of a certain friend that I'm not friends with anymore. Instead of just feeling like, oh, that happened, I just felt like this stabbing feeling of pain, this like regret and like this feeling that things were so much happier back then. And I guess just a sense of emptiness in the present that I had in front of me. So, for instance, if I went back to an old favorite game that I had on Roblox, I guess I just used to feel this inexplainable grief, like I'd lost a part of myself that I could never get back. So, yeah, that sounds super dramatic because hello, we're talking about Roblox here, but I think as Flamingo said, it has more to do with the negativity that we associate with our own current situation and then also the exaggeration of the good in the past that we're kind of just comparing instead of like actually just looking at like something silly like a Roblox game or a song that actually invokes that sad feeling. It's just the comparison in our brains. So, especially when I was younger, I've always been really curious and kind of confused onto why and where this kind of romanticization of the past comes from. So before I get into that, I kind of want to tell you a little bit of an anecdote or a story to just kind of get into why I think it appears and where it comes from. But basically, again, I know I've talked about Roblox like 3 times already, but, it was a really big part of my childhood, so just let me speak. So, I think in, like, the summer between 2nd and 3rd grade, my parents finally let me download Roblox, and I've been wanting this game for so long, and I was so excited to play with my friends. When we went back to school, um, just, like, this group of people who used to play Roblox, which is just, like, 2 or 3 people, we all used to just start hanging out together. We used to just like play Roblox like after school together and play it like on the weekends and stuff until we actually just became like really close friends. And this was like actually a big thing. Like we created like a whole friend group based on people that like just played this game and this stretched out all the way from like I think I said the 3rd grade until the 5th grade. And the 5th grade was our peak. Like we found like all these people, like it was like a big friend group. We were all best friends, super close. Like honestly, it was really cool. It was really peak. Like I remember just sitting around a circle in recess and we used to just like talk or like play catch or something. And I don't know. I guess that was just like what was going on in 5th grade. That was just the cool thing to do. So I guess everything was going really well with me and my Roblox friend group at school. And then in the middle of 5th grade, I guess towards the end, we got a week off from school. And then we got another week off. And then those 2 weeks stretched into an entire year. So basically what I'm trying to say is that COVID hit and everything changed because of quarantine. I'm so privileged to not have any tragedies or anything that I kind of suffered through or anyone that I lost during this time. So yeah, I was just kind of chilling. Like nothing bad really happened to me. But I think just generally, it was kind of like a weird and awkward time to be stuck at home because it was kind of the transition from elementary school into middle school. And that was like a lot of crucial development that was happening in that like 1 year that we had to be away. And I think during that time of development, my friends and I had far too much internet access for our own good and for that age because just yeah, I think we were just like learning about a bunch of things and being on the internet that much was probably not the best thing for us. So I think this time was just kind of a time where our brains were not fully developed. We weren't mature yet, but also we were past the point that we were just like completely ignorant and innocent. We were just starting to understand more about topics that were deeper, like depression, family issues, and just tragedy in general. So from that moment when COVID struck, I think like at the ripe age of 11 years old, I felt like a piece of me had been lost. I found myself a literal child who was still playing around and still very immature, just yearning for the past, yearning for my own childhood. I was so terrified of growing up and losing myself and not really knowing who I was. I think that at this point in my life, my friend group, we were all like, we still talk to each other. We were very active on like Discord and stuff. We always talk to each other. We were a huge friend group still. But I think that we stuck to each other, even if we did get very toxic for each other and even if things did get heated. But I think that we all kind of had that fear of growing apart and we just clung to each other because that was something from the past and that was something comforting even if it wasn't the best match for us. I'm talking about this time because I feel like this is like the part of my life where I was just so nostalgic and I was just trying to cling on to anything I could get that would kind of remind me of my past and like just I guess like my childhood when I was younger and more like ignorant. I often went back to like rewatch childhood shows, like for instance, My Little Pony. And okay, for this, like, this is like a phenomenon. I don't know what was going on with me for like that entire year, or like maybe like that entire 2 years, like I guess following quarantine a little bit too. I was so obsessed with like My Little Pony again. I just kind of became a super fan again. And I was so passionate and like not normal about this show. I don't know what was going on. Um, I think I actually did just enjoy the show and I think it was very fun and just like silly and stuff. But I think more than that, it definitely was a thing where I was kind of just like attached to that and clinging so hard to that part of my childhood. I didn't want to let it go. And obviously this is a show that I liked as a kid. Like I watched that show since I was like 3 years old. So I think just getting obsessed with that thing that I've loved since I was little let me feel comforted through a lot of the new emotions I was feeling and a lot of the struggles that my friends were also going through. So it just helped me feel like, I don't know, happy like a little kid again. It doesn't sound too bad on the outside when I talk about it, and I don't think that it was something that was inherently bad. Like, oh my gosh, she liked My Little Pony when she was 11 years old. It's not that big of a deal. But I think the issue is that I was idealizing this time of my life and that time where there was more innocence, peace, and joy. And I was just so sure that everything else, all of that, was just gone from my life. And I felt so empty because I was just kind of trying to reconnect with something that was honestly just not there. Like there was happiness, there was joy in my life, but not in the same way that it was when I was like, I don't know, like 5 years old. So obviously, as I just explained, you can tell that I was definitely clinging to the past and I had that habit of just clutching on to things that maybe I should have let go of. And not just with that, I don't think that was really the issue. I think it was just like one example that I was talking about. I think there were a lot of toxic friendships and bad habits, like listening to sad music all the time, like being emo. I don't know what was going on. But there's just like a lot of bad habits that I was clinging on to, even though I thought I should let go of them. And I think what went hand in hand with that was the immense romanticization of sadness and mental illness back in 2020. And I think this is something that's obviously always existed, but I guess I just noticed it more when I actually got more internet access, I guess. And I think it just did get a little bit worse during quarantine because everybody was just a little bit like had more free time, was more chronically online and stuff. I talk about this all the time. I feel like it's just something that's really stuck with me because there was so much romanticization of like just horrible things back then. And I know my friend group, like my entire friend group, definitely felt this. We definitely like experienced that. And I don't think that we were the only ones. So I think it was just a pattern back then. Anyways, it was just kind of very trendy to push this idea of depression or sadness and just make it seem desirable and beautiful. So I think our society has always had an issue with just trying to see the beauty and goodness through things that are just painful, and just having that idea that only people that are sad can create things that are meaningful. Like when we look at old renowned people like Sylvia Plath, Edgar Allan Poe, even Shakespeare, we see some of the most beautiful and provoking art comes out of them, but it also comes out of so much of their pain and sadness. I think that this was definitely highlighted through like TikTok and stuff with this push for like the sad girl agenda or the sad girl aesthetic. When listening to Mitski and Lana Del Rey and identifying with Billie Eilish crying black tears was so trendy. I don't know, there's just like a lot of stuff going on, just making it like not just spreading awareness about it, just romanticizing it. I think my friend group, just as a collective, like all of us, struggled with this idea a lot. I don't think that most of us were genuinely struggling through like depression or like anything like that. But when we got sad, we just had this desire to revel in the emptiness, to revel in the pain, and to just make it worse and to feel it as much as we could. Feel like this is just a big pattern in our society, especially Gen Z today, because it's so similar to just how we look back to our past in restorative nostalgia. Nobody's past memories are perfect. No matter how much we want to think that, we ignore and put the bad things, all the imperfections on mute, while we amplify the good things in the past and we yearn for it. Likewise, we made this habit out of romanticizing and chasing sadness. And personally, I think that set me back a lot as a kid because that's just a habit that I just randomly developed and I had to kind of unlearn alongside the rest of my friends. And I think it was just really crazy that at such a young age, our culture kind of pushed that and exposed us to that. But I think it was just kind of an interesting pattern to see because I think those two things do go hand in hand. Looking back on the past and wishing you were there, and romanticizing this idea of being sad or idea of not being good enough. So, why do you feel this way is kind of what I wanted to get into next. If you feel yourself idealizing the past or this idea of sadness a lot, I want to tell you that first off, it's something that's not abnormal. It is very normal. You're definitely not alone. And there are just so many people, including me, that have seriously struggled with this and have found it an issue. To kind of answer my question on why I think that we feel this way, let's go back to the definition of nostalgia that I just explained. Nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. So, the reasons that our brains reminisce is because we find happiness and joy looking back on the good times in our lives. But the reason that we find so much excessive pain when we look back on these things far too much is not because there is something inherently wrong with us. It's because when we keep looking back on our old memories and rely on nostalgia that much, we're depending on it for all of our happiness, and we use it as our only way to find joy. We stop seeing the good things in our own lives because we're just like using those memories for all of our dopamine and all of our happiness. So obviously, when it's something that's past and it's not there anymore, we're not going to feel whole, we're not going to feel happy when that's all we get our joy from. You can go back to the past, but there will be nobody waiting there for you. So, nostalgia is a good thing because it's fleeting. It's good for growth to remind you that you have done something great, you've experienced something great, you've made great connections. But when we linger on something that is past for so long, we rely on something that is already gone. We rely on something that is no longer existent. The issue with restorative nostalgia is that we simply are being excessive in our looking backwards and we're putting all of our energy into looking for something that isn't really there anymore instead of nurturing the future and the present. I think there are two ultimate reasons why we kind of turn to romanticization, both of our past and of sadness. I think the first is that it's definitely a type of coping mechanism, especially when we look back on a time in our life that was not great, that might have been traumatic or just sad. For instance, all of last semester of my sophomore year, just last year, it was just in general a very low point. I think I felt like just very unmotivated and sad most of the time because I had just moved houses. I love my new house, but it is super far away from my school. When I get to my house, like in the winter, it's already pitch black, so that already just kind of like worsened my mood. And then I had a bunch of school stress, friend stress, and just I had a lot going on and it was not organized. It was just a very messy time in my life. And it's not something that I miss at all. I'm really glad that I've grown from that and I'm not in that hole and rut of just low mental health that I was before. However, when I hear like the music that I heard in Thanksgiving 2024, like back on that bad time, like Headlock or something, or if I see like a mouthwashing edit or an arcane edit from like that time period where that was super popular, I feel so nostalgic. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back. Even though I know in my head that was such a bad time for me. Why do I wish that I could go back? Reason that this happens is because our brain is kind of trying to protect itself by focusing on the good from these times, because if we focus on the pain constantly and let it affect us for that long, we'd never really move on or grow from anything. If I let what I felt back then continue to demotivate me and just never let me be happy, I'd never move on and I'd never be able to live my life properly. So it's really messed up, but it's kind of just our brain's way of protecting itself and just continuing to stay motivated, just highlighting this good part in the darkness and trying to kind of trick us. So, yes, our brains are lying to us, and it's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's good that it's kind of forcing us to move on from things, but it's also something that we need to keep in mind. When we look back and miss something, it's not because that time was necessarily perfect or because it was better. The second reason is definitely the more overarching reason, and that is our self-identity. I think both of these issues just spring from this idea of not having a strong enough self-identity, having low self-worth, and not really loving ourselves in the present enough. As I mentioned before, our memories are a huge part of who we are, and I guess a glimpse of the version of ourselves that we had in the past. I think we tend to look back on the past and grieve for a version of ourselves that we think is gone. Grieve for the emotions, the friendships, whatever you missed from that time period, I guess. We cling on to this idea of the past because we think that's a part of our lives where we've peaked and that we can never get higher than that and that we never will go back to that point. As we grow and as we develop, we inevitably will have to leave things behind. We'll have to leave back memories, sometimes people, friendships, things that we used to love. But I think personally, having spent so much time hating myself and wishing things were the way they were when I was little, or like just like wishing things that were different, I can just say that this mentality doesn't really do anything except not allow you to live. Society also presses on this idea that we can only create something meaningful if we are suffering and if we are sad, because that's the only way we'll get across. I feel like that's another thing that might keep us in that hole of romanticization, that hole of not really wanting to get better and to stop looking back on the past. Things genuinely started to look up for me when I actively started to try working on my own self-worth and identity. If we build ourselves on something so meaningless and painful, obviously we're going to feel empty. So, if you struggle with these things, I think my main piece of advice for you would just be trying to find something small, even that makes you a little bit happy and just something that makes you feel grateful. I know the situations that we're in, we can't really control them, but there has to be at least one thing that gives us some amount of joy or some amount of happiness through all the darkness. Like, that could be hanging out with a friend, maybe one of like your hobbies like art, gardening, writing, whatever, reading maybe. I guess just being practicing being grateful for things in the present as well, even if it's something that's just small. I feel like me as a person, I just tend to also focus a lot on the negative and the stuff that are bad instead of being more grateful. So that's something that's definitely helped me as well. But I'd also advise you to try to find something that you're passionate about and that you just can do in your free time that makes you happy. Again, it can be something like super tiny, small, like go water your plants, do a little art piece, write a short story, something like that. It doesn't have to be something gigantic or enormous. But I think if you just kind of put your energy into that, doing a hobby and making something small that you can be proud of, it can just make you connect to the present more and just realize, like there are things that you can be happy for. There are small joys in life and small wins in life. I think personally as well, connecting with Christianity, my religion, has just given me a lot more purpose. Being able to pray to God and just rely on Him, listen to worship music, and feel better has helped me so much with my self identity because I feel a lot of the time I always second guess myself. I always feel like I'm not enough. Just having a connection with God has personally just helped me strengthen my own self identity and helped me feel a lot stronger in the person I am. Now, finally, I want to talk about the beauty of impermanence. So, the idea of moving on and growing is obviously daunting. We all have pain in our lives, and things may be harder for you now than it was before. And I can't just tell you that everything will magically go back to being better than it is right now. But I can tell you that we gain nothing from looking back on these times excessively. It just hinders how we interact with the reality around us and just makes things so much worse. By looking back on these times, we just romanticize these ideas of the past and things that we cannot get back. The truth is, if we were magically to travel back into time, we would not make the same decisions. We wouldn't hang out with the same people or spend our time in the same way and feel completely fulfilled. This is because we as people have just inevitably changed, matured, and developed. And though sometimes we feel like we've changed for the worst, it's usually definitely for the better. I feel like back in middle school, I was just so terrified of losing this part of myself. And that's why I clung on to things I didn't necessarily need to cling on to, and that might have been unhealthy for me to cling on to. What I've learned now is that the past is something that we will always carry with us. It builds who we are as people, and it's not something that we simply can lose. Without the past, we wouldn't have a foundation for our future and have room to make a new start. I think the beauty of life is that we do have room to grow, room to develop, and room to get better, all while carrying the good of the past with us too. It doesn't just disappear. So when I think back to my old friend group, I think going back to Discord or Roblox and like the same server or games that I was playing or whatever will not give me the same joy I did when I was younger and I had those connections with those people because I'm different and things are different. The way that I find joy and happiness through my connections is still fundamentally the same. Though the moments of my childhood and I guess like further innocence have passed by, I'm still the kid that I was at like 11 years old, still watching My Little Pony and interrupting my classes by talking too loudly. I still am her, but with a lot more layers and a lot more maturity as well as depth. I think sometimes we also just cling on to the past because we believe that it cannot get any better in the present. But I think the beauty of life is that we never will know until we let go and just keep going forward. An analogy that I want to use is kind of just of your favorite TV show. Just imagine the first pilot episode. Imagine it just repeated that episode again and again and again. Obviously, you would not love it so much today if it just did that. Most likely, the first episode or season of your sad favorite TV show was not the peak or your favorite part of it. Over time, actors grow, characters develop, and writers actually make just beautiful, developed plots. But if they took this thing from the beginning just because it was good and spent the entirety of their time on the show trying to recreate it instead of trying to grow, there would be zero room from that good to turn into great. So going back into the past and trying to recreate it is not going to give us what we need. At one point, we just need to look at the past and accept it for what it was. So I want to close with this. This is a little quote that one of my best friends right now told me all the way back in 7th grade. And we weren't even close friends back then, but it has stuck with me throughout the years. She told me that we have the choice to make ourselves happy. Obviously that sounds very simple, but I think it just resonates with me so much even right now. I think we have the choice to find joy in the little things and to push ourselves forward. It's easy to lurk in pain and sadness, but the truth is that in our lives there are small things that we do have room to be grateful for and that give us joy. That could be like choosing to spend more time with our friends because that makes us happy, choosing to give more time to our passions or academics or something that can help us grow. I can't, unfortunately, promise you that whatever problems you are facing will disappear tomorrow, because not everything is in our control. But I think we do have the choice to build our identities on something more than regret and self hatred. This is something I struggled with so much in middle school. When I found myself just dealing with this overwhelming emptiness, I basked in it and tied my identity around it. I don't think that necessarily my situation was that bad. I just think I made myself feel that way and made myself feel worse. At the end of the day, we pretty much just started life, and there is so much good to come. There are so many blessings and good things waiting for us. But I feel like this is something we can only achieve when we take a step back and actually give ourselves room to develop and become the best versions of ourselves. We have to start actively focusing on the present, focusing on ourselves, instead of leaning on the past to build a great future. That's kind of a wrap on what I feel about nostalgia and all of this romanticization. I hope that something I said could have resonated with you and connected with you. And I just want to let you guys know, if you're struggling, you don't have to do it alone. Definitely try to reach out to a friend, a trusted adult, a parent, anybody that you can, because there definitely is somebody in your life who cares about hearing your story and helping you get through whatever you're struggling with. That's it for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out our socials, leave a like on this video, or even a comment. I would love to read those. Thank you so much for listening this long, and I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.